think that everybody originally believes that it is from the Bible, right? But for us,
Genesis 1:29, for the Lord said, I give you every seed-bearing plant as food for you to eat.
amen and amen, my brother. But it is more so about, and I say this arguably, being the first plant that is used medicinally in its original purest form. Hence, pure Genesis. That's what it's about. Well, I think in this industry it's interesting, right? I think you have to have influence. I think networking and thought leadership. This is a different dynamic in this industry. I think it is 2 degrees of separation in the cannabis space for this group, right? I think everybody knows somebody within this space. So I think networking is critical, and that's why I joined several boards, or have actually been appointed. I've been so fortunate to be. So being on the African American Chamber of Commerce in New Jersey, the Cannabis World Congress Business Exposition, the New Jersey Cannabis Business Association, the National Hemp Association. You know, all of those board appointments are not just for something to do. It really is about having an opportunity to have a seat at the table. It really is about being purposeful and being able to participate and have a narrative and influence the direction of this industry. So I'm just honored to be a part of those organizations, but really that is, to me, is a step forward in helping you move in this industry. And then there's the thought leadership aspect. You know, I've brought on a group of masters, leaders in the corporate space and the cannabis space. So it's having that type of leadership as part of the team that allows us to purposefully grow. The catalyst of performing, I guess I could take a step back. So why did I even get into this space, right? It goes way back. You know, a long time ago, a very long time ago, as I was a little girl, my mother had breast cancer. So I watched her lose 70 pounds on a 5-foot frame. Her skin turned coal black. Her mental acuity was very low. And just if she had the opportunity for it to have an appetite, you know, through cannabis consumption, she would have had a healthier recovery. She did recover to that. She did succumb later on to heart disease. And then a week later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. You know, so, but I've always looked at alternative medicine, right? So in 2018, I was sitting actually writing a book, that's another story. And I said, did I want to actually continue to do the same thing that I've been educated to do, or was I going to now do what I wanted to do? So I took a step out on faith. I flew to Colorado, went to a Women Grow conference to say, well, let me see, is this a bunch of people getting high and I need to bring myself back home and get to work? Or can I really think about this as an opportunity to transition from corporate to cannabis? I came back, I was excited, grabbed my bestie, who's my co-founder, and we got started in the business. And that was that, and the rest is history, you know. Well, you know, we grow hemp. We're educators, we're business consultants. We're launching a CBD infused cooler this year called Genesis. So we are playing on both sides of the coin, right? I can say, one, it's been a great learning experience for us. I think we play well as a team because we are very educated and experienced in supply chain from end to end. But I think what we realized is if you're going to be an operator in this space, it is truly about equity and access. And if you're going to move forward on the path of being on the ancillary side, it's about network and influence. And because we're on both sides, that's our focus. We've had some challenges. As we got started in 2018, we were established. Immediately, we were going to apply for cannabis license that year. And we returned a $10 million check that year. So year one, we got our learnings out of the gate. We had a bad actor that was an investor. He was a predator. His goal was to take our business, right? But what he didn't understand was he saw the veneer of a group of black women, but he didn't understand who we were, right? And we see that often in this industry. I've been part of many pitches where I've been told, and my team has been told, we have no value, right? Of course we have value. If you look at the data, you've got 1,800 businesses a day being created by women over the last couple of years. 1,800 businesses a day in the US. 89% of those by women of color. The highest growth rate, black women. We have value. It's interesting, as black women entrepreneurs in this space, we own less than 1% of this market. Less than 1%. We have value. The stain on the cannabis industry is the lack of intentional investment in us, period. And if you look at it broadly, black women entrepreneurs, just broadly, make up 15% of all women-owned businesses, yet we only have 3% of the receipts. Why is that? Lack of capital. You still have to go back to your friends and family. People hate to do it, but we did it. We've got 40 investors, all diverse, all black, all males and females. So every single investor we have is a black investor. We're super proud of that. But we did it. They were all friends and family and some Series A investors, and what you have to do is understand collectively that folks that are interested in this space, but are you buttoned up? Are you really ready to showcase who you are and what you're bringing to the table so that people are willing to invest in you? I think sometimes we say we want somebody to invest because we're interested in the space and we want to pursue it. That's great, you want to pursue it, but do you have a business plan? Do you really understand the goals that you have within this space, what it's going to actually take, what capital is needed? What's your strategies? Do you have an architect to do renderings if in fact you're going to be an operator? Do you have an attorney? Do you have a CPA? How have you set yourself up to make certain you look attractive as a business, right? Before you begin to pitch for your business. Right? Because it's private equity is the name of the game right now. So I tell everybody, steadfast, get yourself in the mode of thinking pre-license budget, post-license budget. If you can get the license, you can get the capital. Work on the license first. In terms of social equity, there's so much opportunity with that. To me, equity means access, right? And more often than not, we need the access because it lends itself to moving toward agency. And that's something that black folk aren't used to having, is agency, is choice, right? And really thinking about what choice actually means. I think it was Dr. Rachel Knox that had shared some information around how we are perceived and how we're moving forward, not just in this industry, but period. As you look at our community, we are amongst the poorest, right? And in terms of that, what happens? Now we are subjected to, poor water, poor air, but what we're most subjected to is the disproportionate arrest rate, right? That is, I guess I would say systemically, not in our favor because of the current cannabis policy that is out there. So until we understand the deliberate intention of injury that is hurled upon us, it's hard to get equity in this space. So we have to start thinking about things that are not legislative, but how do we help each other beyond that? and for us, it's about, really bringing equity to the table and seeing how we can make a difference through community engagement. So as we look to pay it forward, that is our focus. We want to be a community first partner. We do that through reentry programs by offering 30% of our positions through reentry programs, offering transferable leadership skills training, more than a living wage. We're doing scholarships and internships at local colleges, incubator space on site, and 1% profit sharing to under-resourced communities. That's how you pay it forward. Well, there's a lot of programs that we're actually engaged in conversations with now, so that when we do have a dispensary, then we can readily tap into them. But what I can say is, a lot of people are saying, well, why are you deploying the use of reentry programs? Aren't you concerned about those that are coming in through reentry programs? And I would say certainly not, because let's face it, Nixon is the one that signed the 1970 Controlled Substances Act, right? Which pretty much devastated the Black community. What did it do? That began the incarceration for minor cannabis possession, right? So, let's call facts facts. A 400% arrest rate of Blacks as compared to whites. If we're not going to hire our own people back for the devastation, the atrocity that has been hurled upon us, who will? So when you talk about reentry programs, is it, what is it? Is it right? Of course it's right. Are we all doing it? Probably we won't. That's going to be one of those things that's going to be put to the litmus test in terms of the value proposition, in terms of what it'll bring to other businesses. But for us, absolutely it's a priority. Yes, so we have a workshop called Now You Know. It is actually trademarked now. And we're super excited about it because broadly it is about educating the masses around cannabis, right? So our focus is on the plant, the medicinal benefits of it, the business, investment, how to prevent drug misuse and incarceration. And originally it was for at-risk youth, ages 13 to 22, because our focus was how can we change their mindset and get them to understand cannabis is not something that we're just smoking behind the bleachers, but now it could actually be a business opportunity. And as we've been able to educate those individuals, they just light up. But we've also educated the NAACP, the African American Chamber of Commerce, and everybody in between. So we've seen that this is huge. For us, we've got to get Gen Zs to the post-war generation, right? To understand the value of understanding this industry. That's where we have to go with this. Because if we do that successfully, we can move this entire industry forward for the Black community's sake, right? Through this education. I think it would be very beneficiary. Anytime you can dispel the myths. I mean, listen, right now, we can't even get our mind around critical race theory, right? So to bring cannabis in right now, I would probably hope within the next 10 years, maybe. Right now, I'm sure not. But I think it's tantamount to how you look at sex education, right? So at the end of the day, should there be education? Yes. How you're educated may be the question. A lot of folks are not going to be educated on cannabis, but they should be, because if they understand it, I think they'll have a different perspective on it and a different value as a result of it. Yes, so I would probably say, if you want to talk about how different they are, let's talk about the first thing. Let's talk about revenue. Right? I think more often than not, people want to go into the tech of the differences between the three. But let's talk about revenue. In 2021, THC or cannabis brought in, $26 billion. CBD brought in $5 billion. Industrial hemp brought in about $800 million. So, right? So that's the difference. Although I would say the sleeper is industrial hemp, because in 2030, it's projected to be $60 billion, right? So, as it should be, 50,000 uses, right? So to me, that is the sleeper. If you look at it from what's similar about it, it's all cannabis. As we continue to educate people, it's cannabis. THC is cannabis, hemp is cannabis, CBD is cannabis, industrial hemp is cannabis. But getting people to understand that, you know, of course you say 0.3% THC or higher is THC or cannabis, right? Medicinal or recreational use. If it's less than 0.3%, if you're using it for CBD, it's all about the leaves and the flower in terms of medicinal and body care products. If it's, you know, industrial hemp, you got the 50,000 uses. So those are the aspects of the differences in terms of that. But I think, you know, what's interesting is you talk about some of the districts. I'm gonna go back on the history piece a little bit. I like history. So if you talk about it from the standpoint of the first colony, right, Jamestown, right, in Virginia, it was interesting that every citizen in Jamestown was required to grow hemp, right? But also, when the first slaves were brought here, they were required to grow hemp. But we never talk about that.
I didn't know that till you just said that.
Right? So we're always talking about cotton, but really in the 1600s, it was about hemp. So slaves had to grow hemp. It was actually called, you may have to change this later on, but it was called the nigger crop.
I'm not changing
It was called, that was what hemp was called, the nigger crop. It was so hard to grow and harvest that white farmers wouldn't touch it. That's how hard it was. Hemp was so important back then, you could pay your taxes with hemp. Well, it's interesting, right? Because with all the navigation around slave trade and what the focus was, right? Everybody talks about cotton, but nobody ever talks about hemp, right? The whole reason for the hemp production within the US was to supply Britain for all the wars that they were having, right? So that was the whole point, okay? So let's be real in terms of what it was and what it was for. So they did that up into the Revolutionary War, right? So when the Revolutionary War took off between the US and Britain, then it was like all bets are off. You know, hemp production is here, we're not sending anything over, you know, but we're still harvesting, right? We're still harvesting, right? And then, yes, so then as those wars began to slow down, hemp was not as needed at that particular time because of its use at that time. That coupled with the fact that the Civil War was coming about, right? Then now you've got a whole issue of what is that looking like? We're losing our labor, our free labor, right? We're losing our industry, which hemp is supposed to be $1 billion industry, right? So what are the dynamics and how is that moving forward, which quickly dissolved? You know, slave labor quickly dissolved, hemp production quickly dissolved, and we all know how things move forward. People never talk about, you know, 50% of all prescriptions in the 1800s were cannabis. We want to talk about should it be legal or not. I'm like, you know, it's been legal. You know, if you look at it as you move forward, nobody talks about, we talk about 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act and all that other fun stuff, but nobody talks about the specifics around that. Nobody talks about how Andrew Mellon, who was the Secretary of the Treasury, signed the $10 bill that was printed on hemp. There's a hemp farm on the $10 bill. But yet Andrew Mellon was the one that actually participated in the whole negative campaign to kill him because he wanted to back DuPont because DuPont found a cheaper way to make plastic and paper. So this is all a greed exercise. So when we talk about the impact, we were made, right? We were made to be at the center of the negative deficits of it, but it was all about greed. I think there's a long way to go here because I think the pharma community, medical community has been nurtured in a certain way to not respect cannabis, right? So because they have not had that opportunity to really do the research, that's where it really lies. When we put federal dollars toward research, that's when we're going to see the medical community really look different at this plant. Right now, you've got a lot of Fortune 500 companies doing a lot of research on their own independently, making themselves ready for when this becomes federally legal. So, I think you've got things like Epidiolex. You have a couple other products out there that are FDA approved that focus on nausea and appetite. Those are things that are out there. You have the CBDA that's supposed to actually block COVID, So those are some things that are already out there, drips and drabs, but this is in its infancy. There's a long way to go. They're still trying to wrap their mind around the endocannabinoid system. Yeah. So, you don't even recognize that. I don't know if you're going to be on board with medicinal treatment. Well, I'm in the hemp space, so I'm not really versed on the cannabis space, but I will say this. In terms of my background in supply chain, if I were looking at this industry, I would say a couple of things are actually happening today. I think one, I think robberies are on the rise. Highway robberies, store robberies. I think there's a lot going on in the space, so I think you've got to have really tight SOPs or standard operating procedures in terms of how logistically you move product. What does your physical security look like? What does your camera surveillance look like? What does cybersecurity look like? And I'm talking about within your vehicles as well as at your facilities. Do you have that locked down? Because I think if you do, I think there's a good opportunity for you to be successful as we wait for laws to relax in terms of interstate commerce. But right now, know the law so you don't get caught moving product where it shouldn't be moved. Yeah, this is a good question. I'm going to focus on industrial hemp for a second because we talked about it before. It's a $60 billion business, right? What do I see for the future? I see us. I see us in it. The challenge is we have to see us in it. They launched earlier this year a $1 billion climate smart commodities grant on the steps of Lincoln University in Missouri. That's when I found out there were two HBCUs called Lincoln University. I didn't know that. That's why I had to say Missouri. I was like, I didn't know that.
And it's also an HBCU.
It's also an HBCU. So I said, okay. And then also they launched a $100 million SaaS or sustainabilities grant, which is focused on the supply chain. So it's interesting that they did that because now the focus is how are we getting folks to understand the opportunities within industrial hemp? No longer is industrial hemp just for hempcrete. Let's talk about it in real terms. There are other things going on in terms of biofuel, textiles, decortication, the separation of hurd from fiber. Now that we can do it, we're trying to make it cheaper, faster. New product developments that are higher tech. Biochar that you actually can do for soil amendment so you don't have to rotate your crops. You have activated carbon so that you can purify water. Think of continents like Africa. You have graphene, which is stronger than Kevlar, that BMW is wrapping their cars with and Tesla is doing their batteries with. There's huge opportunities within the industrial hemp space, but the biggest opportunity is that we're not in it, and we've got to get in it. In 1920, we had 1 million farmers. 1 million farmers, black farmers. That's hard for me to even fathom. Today we have 50,000. 50,000. And a lot of those are going to foreclosure right now. We are land rich and cash poor. That's the challenge. So it's interesting. A couple weeks ago, the what's it called? The healthcare tax and climate bill that just passed. They snuck $2 billion in there to give up to $500,000 per farmer that was discriminated against due to bad USDA loan practices, all the way up through 2021. I say that because we've got to make certain that there are individuals, those individuals who are out there are taking advantage of these so that we can work with them to revitalize their lands that are currently being underutilized because they've lost the cash necessary, the capital necessary to infuse in it to keep them moving forward. At the same time, we've got to also work with our Black youth. And we've got to do that through our HBCUs. So right now I'm partnering with an organization called Hemp, the Cannabis Health Equity Movement, that's led by Dr. Rachel Knox and Dashida Dawson. And it really is about providing global campuses that are looking to revitalize underperforming Black communities, create a pipeline of talent within HBCUs, job creation, workforce development. This is what's needed, tangible strategies to move us forward. And I think industrial hemp can really help us do that. So for us, personal story. So when we got started growing hemp, we grow hemp in 3 states. When we got started, CBD was the gold rush, right? And then all of a sudden it wasn't, right? It was, and then it wasn't. We were in the midst of that. So what we learned quickly is that, especially in the hemp space, you have to be conservative in your approach. You got to be able to adapt to the changing trends. So that's why we shifted from growing CBD to getting into the CPG space, right? We went into consumer packaged goods and we developed our beverage Genesis. And we're super excited about it. We market tested it in 2020 and 2021, came back 97% approval rating. In June of this year, we did 1,500 samples at the Cannabis World Congress Business Exposition to rave reviews. So we're going to be launching it later this year. So follow us on Genesis Infused if you want to check us out. So we got 3 flavors, Euphoria, Signature, and Elite. And I promise there's a flavor for everyone. I would have brought some today, but we had to ship some out actually to California. But next time. Thank you. Yeah, so yeah, we're really excited about it. You talk about ways of which, and I wanted to you talked about something earlier, and I apologize, I couldn't remember the question. But as we look to give back and pay it forward, one area that we are focused on is next year, we're going to be launching our signature event called Black Girls Can.
I love that.
And it is going to be 100 Black women leaders in the space that will be invited to this event. Our objective is to unmute the value, the voice, and the vision of Black women leaders in this space. The goal is to engage us, to empower us. But in short, it's about helping us win, because we haven't been winning. What we're going to do is bring leaders within the cannabis community to really help to elevate these businesses, provide a blueprint for success as we look at operators, ancillary support, one-on-one mentorship, and capital strategies, which are ever so important. So be on the lookout for information later this year, but maybe the Roots Express will be a part next year. Would love to have you guys. So, yeah. Well, I think I talked a little bit about the trajectory before. I think we're looking at that $60 billion cap for industrial hemp. CBD, I still think is unknown, because I think that everybody got a little bit of a shot in the arm. It's not what it used to be, and people are somewhat gun shy right now. But industrial hemp is where people are taking off. But I think to get started in this, you got to get educated first and foremost. So we definitely recommend those who are interested in being educated, focus in on our Now You Know workshop. It will definitely help in terms of, moving folks forward in this industry. If you give thought to, the preservation of our Black community and how we're moving forward, the fastest way is always going to be through education. That's what I can say. In terms of federal legalization, especially in terms of society, I would say my hope, and I don't like using the word hope because hope is never a strategy, but I can say the hope is that at some point, cannabis will be federally legal in the manner that arrest rates will come down, that decrim will be a mandate, and home grow will be legal. And that home grow will be legal. You have a huge movement federally. You have the Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act, right? You have the MORE Act, which really is about taking cannabis off the list of controlled substances, right? And then looking to focus in on how states can improve their laws and do things like decrim. So you have that you wanna move forward. And as you look at federal legalization as a whole, you can never say, is it going to happen in 2 years, 5 years? I would say those things that are happening with the CAOA and the MORE Act, I would say the Safe Banking Act, look at the Safe Banking Act. As soon as they give the approval to provide banking services, I think the banks will they'll feel better. The one thing I may not feel better about is it may not be good for us. It may not be good for the Black community. Once the banks get involved, and here's why. It's the same predatory lending practices that'll still exist, right? It's the same practices for lending where the MSOs, the multi-state operators, now get the lion's share of the loans that are out there. And we still have to grapple with not being qualified, right, for loans, or being limited to the loans that we'll have access to. So that's a double-edged sword that's coming for us. So I'm not quite sure how I feel about that. But then we also have a lot of legislation that's going around in terms of research. So there's a lot in the space that's going around. I think it's imminent that it will be legal. In terms of when, that's a different story.